Ladies and gents, welcome to Shoju Reacts, and this is the disturbing movie Iceberg Explained graphic content. The channel Wendigoon. Yeah, people told me to react to this channel, I guess, after the cave, was the name? The cave from Internet Student, the latest video, which was kind of fucked up, right? First of all, that was a different video from Internet Student. I mean, I know there's been like balloon boys and things, but you know, there has always been some form of ridiculousness in his video, while the latest one was kind of just incompetence and just disturbing in a way, right? I feel like it was a bit different from Internet Student, but I don't know. But obviously, Wendigoon was part of that video. He was the one who's inside the cave, was playing, yeah. So people told me that his channel is really good and he makes great videos. Apparently, all of his videos are like 1 and 1.5 and even 2 hours long. So I'm gonna have to do this in parts. But yeah, this is, I guess, one of the famous videos from his channel. 8.5 million views, disturbing movie Iceberg. I haven't done any Iceberg Explained videos ever, right? I mean, maybe I have watched one or two, but I don't know. But so this is going to be interesting. Let's watch it.
Oh boy. So I've always been a big fan of horror movies. You guys know that at this point. And with horror movies, it's natural that you kind of find yourself in the realm of like disturbing or gross out movies. So naturally, whenever I was looking for icebergs to do for a video, I was looking for disturbing movies. And everyone I found had like The Conjuring midway down, and then I'd seen every movie on it. So I wasn't really interested until I found this. User Nice Guy Phil on Reddit has made this horrible creation. I thought before getting into this I knew what like disturbing and gross out movies were because I'd seen stuff like Salo or a Serbian film and stuff like that. To put that in,
Wait a minute, so these are tiers? It's like first tier, second is that, and this is like the last tier thing? Damn. Okay.
perspective, those are on tier 3 of 8. I didn't even know it could get this bad with a lot of these. And with no exaggeration, I have legitimately lost sleep over this research. I'm not saying that to make myself sound all cool and like, oh, look what I do for YouTube. I'm saying that to say, like, if you're sensitive about certain stuff, do not watch this video. I'm gonna try to like be very careful with my wording and just sort of imply some things rather than say them, as you know, being monetized is nice. Again, I won't be showing a lot of images. If this is your first time watching, then I'm sorry about that, but I can't show a lot of these images. I'm normally a bit better with like the editing and illustrations, but I've got to be really careful with a lot of this topic, especially as we get near the bottom of the list. There's going to be like happy music and haha, I'm going to make jokes throughout or try to keep it lighthearted. But in all seriousness, if you are disturbed by heavy content, viewer discretion advised. Also, with a lot of the research for this iceberg, especially the later entries, it's either
there's going to be joke, there's going to be happy music, but let's let's not make this light. This is going to disturb you. If your child is gonna scar you, okay?
Illegal, or I just really don't want to find the original subject matter. But thankfully there were a ton of people on YouTube who were a huge help to me, and a bunch of them were smaller creators. So at the end, I'm gonna give them specific thanks, but for now I'll let you know that in the description are going to be the links to several smaller channels that helped me out in making this video. And if there's anything more specific you want to see about some of these topics, I'm sure that they've got a video on it. So I highly encourage you to check them out, as I literally couldn't do this without them. Also, you may notice that this is the first video I'm not wearing a dad shirt, and that is because I am wearing the first official Wendigoon merchandise. Link to it will be in the description. I'm still setting up some stuff on the website, so bear with me if it looks kind of ugly right now. If you're a patron, then stick around to the end to figure out if you're already receiving the shirt or not, or follow the timestamp in the description below, which leads me to say there will be timestamps for every tier, so if the topic of one tier seems a bit much, you can just skip to the next one. We have got a whole lot to cover, so we're going to go ahead and get into it. But as always, and I sincerely mean it, thank you for watching. The first tier of the blue skies
warning, goddamn,
is just normie horror movies. Okay. And since this is about like disturbing films and we've got a lot to cover, I'm just going to go ahead and throw all these together. Friday the 13th, Child's Play, Scream, Insidious, Conjuring, Annabelle, The Grudge, The Ring, A Nightmare on Elm Street. While good movies are not in the qualifications for this, which makes sense. They're not even in the water of the iceberg yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and skip past those because I have nothing interesting to say. and we're just going to keep rolling on. Tier 2 is where we start with the Grindhouse films. First up is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This movie was directed by an at the time unknown Tobe Hooper. The movie's rather iconic now as it brought us characters such as Leatherface, as well as an entire series with prequels and sequels. Although the original one still remains in most people's eyes to be the best, as it's the most visceral with its depiction of how these humans are treated. For those that don't know the plot, essentially a group of teenagers get lost while on a trip in Texas and are attacked by a hillbilly murder family. The main idea behind the film is that it's a critique of the meat industry, with the humans in the movie being treated the way that animals are treated within slaughterhouses and meat production facilities. I couldn't find the exact length, but I swear I remember Wes Craven talking and saying that watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre made him a vegetarian. So I guess Tobe Hooper did his job in that regard. Saw is another minimal.
Yeah, so I don't think I watched the full movie, but I remember some parts of it. And yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense if you flip it around like that. If you imagine cows, that way, yeah, it kind of tracks. So that was the purpose of that movie. I just thought it's just. Yeah, first of all, look, understand why one of the famous horror films are in the tier 1, right? Something can be, how to say it, really scary, even like what the fuck type of scary, but it's something else to say something is disturbing. Like, human imagination can go a lot of places that we can't even process. So certain films out there doesn't necessarily is horror films, but something happens in them that is so disturbing. You'll be stunned for a second, right? I mean, I don't think I've watched many films like that, maybe one or two. I guess when the list goes by, if I had watched it, I guess I'll know it. But yeah, I can see why he gave 3-minute warning, because if he's going through all the list, like all the effed up movies out there, disturbing things out there, yeah, by the end of this video, yeah, it would be too much to, I guess, take, but I don't know.
Horror movie that spawned a series of sequels afterwards. While they got more outlandish with each entry, the core idea of the film is that people are put through these games in which they have to injure themselves in some way in order to survive whatever predicament they're in. This is all done by a serial killer known as Jigsaw in order to teach people what it means to live or to appreciate the life that they have. The original was directed by James Wan, who later went on to do The Conjuring and several other high-budget horror movies. But me personally always liked him for what he was, a sort of the guerrilla filmmaker that created such a small contained movie that got the viewer thinking so much. Several people have described it as a thinking man's horror movie, and while I wouldn't really call this like the definitive horror film, I think it's a classic that shouldn't be overlooked. Hostel was a slasher fic that many would say was riding off the coattails of Saw, made by director Eli Roth. Now, you may remember Eli Roth as the Bear Jew from Quentin Tarantino's film Inglourious Bastards. Eli Roth actually appeared in an earlier Tarantino film, that being Death Proof, and the two of them became very close friends, which is what eventually got Eli Roth the role of the Bear Jew. In fact, they became so close with each other that when Eli Roth made his first horror introduction with the film Hostel, Tarantino allowed him to put his name at the beginning, so in the opening of Hostel it says a Quentin Tarantino production. Hostel is a very well-known horror movie, and a lot of people kind of have this idea that Saw was the definitive torture porn entry. We're gonna get into the real torture porn later, but we'll save it for now. However, Hostel...
Yeah, look, there's not many people in the movie industry whose names carry weight like a Quentin Tarantino movie, let's be honest. You think like, okay, that's a nice gesture. That's not just a nice gesture. If you put a Quentin Tarantino movie, that's gonna help a lot.
Is much more brutal in its depiction of violence than the original Saw ever thought about being, sequels not included. Tusk is a now rather well-known cult classic by director Kevin Smith. This was part of Kevin Smith's horror movie trilogy, in which he did this, Red State, and the one about like talking sausages in a store, not Sausage Party, but same idea, live action. It's body horror but with a twist. Whereas traditional body horror is ideas of people getting mutilated or cut up, this film was more so about the actual changes or metamorphosis of the human body. Basically, plot of the movie, a man kidnaps a young journalist and then puts his body through a surgery that converts him into a living seal abomination thing. A lot of people find this really disturbing. I think it's funny, but I enjoyed the movie either way. Funny, so really? Whatever. Human Centipede is, in my opinion, one of
I was gonna say that at the start of the video, because when I said the disturbing, this human. First of all, people say that this is a bad movie. I don't know. I haven't watched it, but I get the point of it, right? I remember, was it South Park? I think South Park made a parody of this. But yeah, this whole concept is like, what the fuck? Like I said, human imagination can go a lot of places that most people won't even understand, right? There are certain artists out there, writers, who can take this into a whole other level. Yeah, this movie is just, I mean, every time I hear this name, some people will be horrified. I'm just laughing because I only remember South Park thing.
Misunderstood movies ever. From director Tom Six, the movie actually comes, or the idea of it, from a conversation he had in which people were trying to figure out what the appropriate punishment for child predators might be. While a lot of people just kind of view the movie now as like exploitive and awful and vile and whatever, the original I do feel like had a purpose. At least when I watched it, I picked up on a lot of Nazi symbolism with the way that the evil doctor acts and the experiments themselves. They're very similar to that of Joseph Mengele and the Angel of Death experiments. And I viewed it as kind of a modern interpretation of what evils like that might exist. Now, it spawned a very meta trilogy in which they reference back to the original movie, especially 3, which was just weird. But the original Human Centipede will probably forever be a cult classic. Midsummer is one of my personal favorite horror movies to come out in the past decade. By filmmaker Ari Aster, who is also known for Hereditary and his short film Something About the Johnsons, which discretion advised when searching that. Midsummer has got to be the only movie I think I've ever seen that truly made me sympathize with a cult. And what's funny is because of the way Ari Aster tells his stories, you don't really realize that's the point it's getting to till the end. This feeling of sympathy is pervasive throughout as you follow the main character, played expertly by Florence Pugh, as her tragedy and strife throughout the story kind of becomes yours. There's this thing Ari Aster said a while back, that his first film Hereditary was sort of a movie about families and togetherness, and off of that he said that Midsummer was his breakup film. And then thinking about the emotions you feel throughout and how you kind of go through the 5 stages of grief with the characters, yeah, it really does feel like a breakup movie. Damn. If not in a literal way, then in a very deep-rooted emotional way. I highly recommend Midsummer to anyone who hasn't seen it. Now, there's 2 more movies on this tier, which I promised to a certain somebody that if they ever came up on a video, they could talk about it because they are 2 of her favorite movies. So here she is, your favorite idiot, to tell you about House of a Thousand Corpses and The Hills Have Eyes.
Okay, so 2 movies on my top 10 list of favorite movies, because I love horror. Horror is my favorite genre are The Hills Have Eyes and The House of a Thousand Corpses. The Hills Have Eyes is a Wes Craven movie. It came out in the 70s, and it follows a family, like a normal everyday family. They're on vacation somewhere out west because it's a lot of like open stretches of road and deserts. And they're in a van, and their van breaks down. So they're basically attacked by this hillbilly family, and they slowly are picking off each member of the like normal family. And then eventually, after part of their family has been picked off, the remaining members of this like normal family start to fight back. And I think the reason it's considered a disturbing movie is just because of all the killing that happens, and there's like the R word, and you know, the people, all these actors have some kind of physical deformity, so you can call it disturbing like that, but it doesn't really get to me in that way. I just like it because it's an old campy 70s movie. But at the end, the family does start to fight back, and you can see like the nuclear family becoming savages, like the savages who were affected by nuclear waste. Ooh. Okay, so continuing on the same list of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah, so I guess that doesn't count that much as disturbing, is it? It's just like in a way, a normal concept. A van breaks down, a sudden disturbing hillbilly family attacks, and it's just simply movies like that, right? Attacks, kills off, then they fight back. Yeah.
Movies at all. This next movie is probably like my top 5 just overall in general movie, and it is The House of a Thousand Corpses by Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie is unironically my favorite director just because I think he encompasses everything about horror that I love, like the campiness of the 80s, the practical effects, the really hilarious characters that he writes that there in no way could ever possibly be a real, like no real person would ever act like that, like no real person could possibly be like that deranged. So the entire movie feels like you're at a haunted house.
Yeah, okay, first of all, why does like those 80s, 90s, like, that kind of movie kind of feels like a scary a bit, right? You have that kind of a mentality with, people just, doing drugs and whatever, right? Why does that feel so, disturbing? Because that's the time where technology wasn't as much as it is today right now. Even if you go to one of the most remote towns, they would have access to phones, internet, and shit like that, right? Back then, that wasn't the case. So when they show some town in some, some backwoods town with, surrounded by woods and shit and certain things happening, you feel like they're disconnected from the world because they kind of are, right? So that's why movies like that kind of feels disturbing, right? This was the time of like, make peace, man, not war type of time, right? And around that time, there's so many movies like that, bad shit happening. It just feels dark. If movies like that happen in today's time, and it's shown that it's happening in today's time, it wouldn't feel that scary because you have access to so many things today.
Because literally it opens up, they're at Captain Spaulding's haunted house, and that definitely adds to the whole disturbing feel of the movie, and that's how a lot of Rob Zombie movies are. That's definitely how the 2 sequels to House of a Thousand Corpses work. I guess if you're scared of people getting murdered or like torture movies, it's disturbing, but aren't all good horror movies disturbing in some way? But yeah.
We are
That's
now
the
on to
point
tier
of
3,
horror.
which is your sort of hardcore exploitation films. Also, I want to say to the side, Nice Guy Phil absolutely knocked it out of the park with this.
Wait a minute.
That every single tier has a specific meaning to it. Like tier 2 we just did was grindhouse films, this one's exploitation films, and each tier is a specific genre or type of disturbing movie. I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was really cool, and it made getting into this a whole lot cooler, or dreadful, because we'll get to it later. This tier is probably where most of the disturbing movies you've heard of on YouTube come from, but like I said, it's just 3 of 8, so yay. Solo, or 120 Days of Sodom, is based on the true story of what happened at the end of World War II in fascist Italy. Also, I should mention, this is the point where I'm going to quit recommending movies because if you're the type of person to watch one of these movies, you either already know about it or I'm not going to be the one to tell you. The plot revolves around a group of essentially rich elites who realize that they're probably going to be killed by the time the war is over, so they decide to just let their cares go to the wind and spend the last days of the war in complete sin and evilness. They do this by bringing 18 teens, 9 boys and 9 girls to...
Wait a minute. Is this based on... What he said? Is this based on real thing?
Essentially a castle and then being horrible. While a lot of people just kind of view this movie as standard gore porn, evil, exploitative stuff, which, trust me, I get it. This does feel purposeful, at least especially compared to the stuff later in the list, as the purpose of it is to show the true effects of men, and specifically these real things that happen that a lot of people have just forgotten about. The film is structured as the 4 parts of Dante's Divine Comedy, and we see the slow dip from depravity into evil as it passes throughout the movie and mirrors that of ancient literature. That didn't stop, however, the movie from being banned in most countries, as well as several arrests made to producers and editors, and 3 weeks before the film came out, the director was murdered. So yeah, people didn't take too kindly to it. Martyrs is a tale of 2 women who are held in captivity for the majority of their younger life and later come to get revenge on those who wronged them. The movie is often hailed as being so disturbing by specifically the end scene, which involves someone having skin and then not having skin, although there are scenes throughout of general violence and torture scenes. While a lot of people view this as your standard like gore exploitive stuff, I absolutely love Martyrs. It feels very reminiscent of the internet horror story that was floating around a few years back called Gateway to the Mind, but it's a very excellently done tale of redemption in my opinion, and it sort of weaves a mystery throughout of what's going on that by the end of the movie it ties a nice bow on it, and you're able to recognize everything that's just happened and some of the actions that take place before make sense. If you're okay with a lot of violence and viscera, I would recommend Martyrs to anyone who likes horror. Pink Flamingos is a movie...
Okay, damn. Look, art can be expressed in many ways, right? So I can understand certain things are too disturbing to be, get banned in many places. But damn, man, that 120 days thing, 120 Sodom, whatever that was, right? That's a movie, I guess, showing, I guess, what happened in Italy after World War II, right? And holy shit, in a week, director was murdered because people were pissed off that he made the movie. I mean, this is just fucked up, isn't it? I mean, same thing with this, like, in the end, right? I guess I can't even say the word having skin and not having skin, fine. I guess that's the word we're going to use on YouTube. Yeah, I can see how that's going to be disturbing. But, reading past that, the emotions, like how the writings was done, that's the whole point of it, isn't it?
From John Waters, the guy that did the original Hairspray. Yes, I'm not kidding. Released in 1972, it is a story of a family who claim to be the filthiest family alive, and yeah, they're probably in the running for it. There's a lot of like weird kith-related stuff throughout the film that is gross. Like any other John Waters movie, there's this overarching idea of being true to oneself, even if it's not the best option in this case. There were several references to things like human trafficking and cannibalism and like a chicken. The film's probably most famous for a scene in which a drag queen eats dog poop. And no, that's not a joke. That actually happens on camera. But if me saying that just now, like, turned you off to this video, turn back now. Shoju Sabuki, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, is a banned Japanese anime. The basic plot is that a young girl finds her mother dead, and this scene itself is very brutal. Like, she pulls off the covers and there's rats crawling inside of her and stuff like that, to which she's then picked up by a traveling circus. And then from there it just gets into a lot of shock factor stuff, like the girl being abused and the circus freaks abusing each other. And like there's a scene with puppies that doesn't need to be there, but it is because it's shocking and yada yada yada. Some of you may know this film because it was trending on TikTok a while back. Like, people were pointing at it as a sort of shock site type thing. But in my opinion, it's kind of just shocking for the sake of being shocking. While there is sort of this overarching plot of like sticking true to yourself in the face of evil, it doesn't justify the things that are shown on screen. A Serbian film is...
Look, man, I hate that whenever, something like that. Just, it's the same thing as a horror movie showing, what are they called? Screamers? Like suddenly, everything is silent, the dialogues are silent, and suddenly something happened with a sound effect. It's just, what the fuck? It just shocks you. I don't like that kind of element in films. It just feels cheap in a way. Same thing as Game of Thrones was just killing character also because, whoa, that character is killed. Like, yeah, I guess that's getting old now.
One that you're probably familiar with if you know the disturbing movie trend. This movie is about a man who is a kith star who is contracted by the shady men to be in very special films. From there, the movie just kind of keeps up the idea of making it worse and worse, from the other actresses who are in these films to the things that he has to do in them, leading all the way up to a climax that's really gross and just gross for the sake of being gross, where to me the film just feels kind of try hard and there's this thinly veiled plot over it just to connect one extreme scene to the next, which is actually what the director would agree with, because he said that the purpose of this film was a way to attack the fascist censoring that was occurring in Serbia at the time, hence titling it a Serbian film. Which, if the entire point of this movie was just made to make people upset and throw a middle finger at the censor bar, good job, I guess, but that doesn't necessarily make it a good film. Human Centipede 2 was what I was talking about with the original Human Centipede, and that the sequels just kept amping up the factor. The plot itself is very meta too. A person who's working in a parking garage sees the original Human Centipede movie and gets inspired to do that to people that he kidnaps. While the film tries some artistic things, like the whole thing shot in black and white, it's kind of a facade for a lot of the more extreme stuff the film puts forward. Like, for example, there's several scenes of self-mutilation, and he's trying to build a longer human centipede, and it gets grosser and more intense. And I do think that this was just a way to capitalize off the first movie, as all of those effects I was talking about in the first of being purposeful and meaningful with this presentation feel totally lost here in favor for just basic gore porn. Cannibal Holocaust is believed...
I can see that after the first movie, how to make the second one even more horrible, shocking, and even worse than the first one. Yeah, that's when you lose the, core point of your film, right? You're trying to do too much. I guess that happens with lots of sequels. The purpose gets lost and only element you're left with how to make it even more than it was before.
And stated by many to be the original found footage movie. This mockumentary was set up as if a film crew traveled to the rainforest, or Green Inferno as they call it, and made contact with a local tribe of savage natives. Supposedly, the savages wiped out the original film crew, which warrants a essentially military group to go in and find the original supplies and wipe out the locals. However, what's interesting is they find from the cameras of the original film crew that went in that they had initiated the violence by burning down villages in order to get good shots and attacking and abusing the local women in order to make them more upset. And in my opinion, it's a really good movie in that regard, as it raises the question of who is the real monsters. However, that doesn't justify everything that was done in order to make that movie. For example, there are several real animal deaths that occur on screen, such as a turtle, a boar, a tarantula, and I believe a snake. Also, keep in mind, this was before any found footage movie was a thing. So when it came out, a lot of people thought it was real. So real, in fact, that the director was arrested and had to have the actors who died in the film come forward in order to prove that they were still alive.
Wait a minute.
While I personally like it, I understand it's a very...
Wait a minute, I remember this, right? I guess this is the movie. I guess this is the first time it happens. This must be the movie, right? This kind of this type of element movies, right? Where it just they make it look like this is real. This was the first one of it, and I remember, I guess reading somewhere that they actually had to, I guess, bring out the actors. Like, look, they are alive. It's just a movie. I guess this was the one. Holy shit! And this kicked off a lot of, like, what was that, like? The Witch something, I forgot the name, Witch Project or something, right? I guess that had the issue of something like that as well, where they deliberately made sure the actors didn't appear in public for a week or something, and the movie came out. I'm pretty sure that was the case, or was that a rumor? I don't know. That's just fucked up.
Intense film that is not for everyone, but if you want to see the original found footage horror movie, this would be the one to check out. The House That Jack Built is a Lars von Trier movie about a serial killer named Jack. The core plot of the movie is divided into 5 sections, with 5 separate incidents in which Jack is carrying out his serial killer rampage. With each one of these, Jack keeps getting better at the killings and more precise in how he handles it. As far as disturbing scenes go, most people point to the 3rd killing of the movie, in which he equates humans to deers and then goes hunting. However, The House That Jack Built is, in my opinion, a very well done film, and the symbolism of the house itself and the eventual lead into the plot of Dante's Inferno, I feel is very well done. And while disturbing, I also wouldn't call it the most disturbing of Lars von Trier's films. In my personal opinion, I would have replaced this on the list with something like Antichrist or maybe Nymphomania, as I feel those 2 films are more intense in the disturbing respect, but I'll allow it. Suicide Club is a Japanese film about a situation in which several teenagers are attempting to commit suicide. The plot mostly follows that there is this pop band that is subliminally convincing people to kill themselves. So therefore, groups of teenagers that listen to them commit suicide en masse, such as jumping in front of trains or off buildings. And it's pretty over the top of the gore. However, the effects are rather dated and kind of silly by today's standards. Aside from one violent scene involving a cat, it's basically your standard fare, oh no, world's ending happening type thing. Tetsuo the Iron Man is a body horror film from Japan, and in my opinion, one of the best I've ever seen. See, body horror now is just kind of recognized as like, let's see how much we can injure someone, and that's where body horror comes from. But for me, it's always been more what still defines a human as a human. I talked about it kind of in my Lighthouse video when I mentioned The Thing, but in movies like The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, whenever you see him as this amalgamation of body parts and you're trying to figure out if that's still a human or not, to me, that's what body horror should be more of. There's this really niche subgenre of body horror films known as melt movies. Melt movies are exactly that. People in the film are melted down, and the horror of it comes from when does that person stop being a person. You can kind of think of this as like the Blob remake and stuff like that, where the horror comes from the impossibility of the human form being broken down to such lengths. Tetsuo the Iron...
So yeah, I mean, let's be honest, horror, disturbing, this is all psychological things. So whenever something psychological like that is involved, like when a human stops being human with different type of innovative ways, right? I mean, that is disturbing, right? I mean, like he said, in modern world, when something like this exists, it's just like injuries and... Wait a minute. So in today's world, like he said, whenever they talk about something like this, it's just like injuries and things like that, like, oh, just torture elements like that, right? But the psychological element is real, like when a person stops becoming a person, right? I mean... this has fascinated us for a long time, right? That's why, what is consciousness? What makes a human human? What makes a person person? Even in science, that's a leading question right now. So exploring that element, I mean, it kind of is more terrifying in a way, right? Like witnessing that. Same thing, you know, people are going to question in the future about AI, is like when AI becomes a person or whatever, right? So yeah.
Iron Man feels like a metal melt movie. The basic plot is
What?
this metal fetishist
I didn't see that. Look at the eye and the metal. Oh, okay, makes sense.
has a sort of disease in which random pieces of iron and metal are overtaking his body, and after a man hits him with his car, he begins to slowly infect the man with that same disease. Stop motion is used in order to do these amazing special effects for the time, in which these impossible shapes are coming out of this guy, and he's becoming more iron than human, and it's very well done, and I highly recommend you watch it. So everything that I mentioned in the past years has been movies that I've known about beforehand, and it's been like, yay, cool, horror.
You know what? I'll just stop now. It's like end of tier 3, right? How to do this in parts? I guess I'm gonna do like 2 or 3 parts. It's gonna be 3 parts, let's be honest, right? So tier 4, tier 5, holy shit. So I didn't realize that when I started this video, but every single part I make is gonna be more intense apparently, and this was just the start of it. Yeah, I don't even know what's gonna happen next time, and God, I know for a fact that human imagination can be really disturbing, right? I mean, yeah, I can't really say something specific, but I know there are movies that exist that can be really disturbing. Like if you watch it for a week, at least you'll be disturbed. I mean, you won't put your you won't be able to put your finger to it, like why you disturbed. It's not like you can remember any specific part or any specific part of the movie is haunting you. Your just psychology would be disturbed for a week at least, right? I mean, I know that I've watched certain movies when I was I guess long. I mean, I don't watch horror movies that much nowadays, but you know, when I was a kid, like in my late teens or whatever, right? I remember watching certain movies like that, and I'm like, why am I disturbed, man? I can't really put my finger to what is making me disturbed, but yeah, this shit is disturbing. So I know certain things, certain movies and plot of it, certain things can be really disturbing. I guess we're gonna find that in, I guess, later tiers. I guess the mid tiers. What I'm describing is gonna be mid tiers. I don't even know what's gonna happen in the last tiers, how disturbing that's going to be, but okay. Damn. Right, well, that was, I guess, first part of the disturbing movie Iceberg explained by the channel Wendigoon. Yeah, people are right. This is a really good channel. He explained things really great. I haven't seen any other channel who goes into depth like this. Not talking about a 1.5 hour long of all the different tiers of disturbing movies. But yeah. Alright, I guess I'll see you next time.